All right, we now bring in our Attack the Wreck fantasy guru, Corey Wolters. He has been a recurring guest on the Attack the Wreck YouTube channel, talking some basketball stuff in the past. We have now reached a contract with him, brought him on board to be our fantasy football guru. Very quick and easy negotiations. Corey, you and your agent, phenomenal. Thank you so much. We're going to talk here some fantasy football stuff. I want to know, first of all, you and I have been buddies for a while. We've talked fantasy football for quite a while. I know you typically are in several leagues, it seems like every year. This year, 2024, how many leagues are you in?
Well, first off, Kurt, thanks for having me. I'm not sure if it's a good idea to put that information out there. If my wife sees this, she might kill me. Um, but I right now I'm on pace for like between 125 and 135, 140.
Okay, now a lot of those are probably best ball leagues.
Correct.
Okay,
I'm in like six redraft leagues, live redrafts.
wow.
Everything else is like best ball
Okay.
between, Underdog, and a number of different sites.
Okay, so I'm trying to get Big Mo to do some best ball fantasy football this year. Um, he always says, I don't got time for it. I don't got time for it. In my opinion, and I need you to explain a little bit how best ball works a little bit more to Big Mo, but um, to me that seems like it's right up his alley because there really isn't a ton of time. Am I accurate in saying that?
Yeah, no, best ball is great because you basically draft 18 to 20 rounds and you don't ever have to change your lineup. So if, for example, you draft, running back and they're in your starting rotation, if a bench player outscores them, they're automatically put in. You don't have to touch or change your lineup at all throughout the year. I guess the downfall is if a player gets hurt, you can't add or trade with other players. But you just that's your lineup and that's how it is the entire year.
Right. So at least, but obviously you don't want anyone to get hurt, especially your better players. But if that does happen, it's
Hmm.
not like you now all of a sudden have to um, get on the website, get on the waiver wire, try to pick somebody up because automatically it's just going to insert the next best guy.
Correct. Yep. There's no adding players, dropping players, trading with players, nothing, none of that. That is your team for the whole year, and whatever the best scores are, that's what they put in. If you only draft two tight ends and one's on a bye week and the other one's hurt, you don't get any points for the tight end position that week.
Gotcha. All right. So hopefully we can get Big Mo in at least doing one of those leagues. So you got six other more traditional leagues, redraft leagues. Is that a typical number for you year in and year out, or are you up a little bit this year or down?
I think it's pretty typical. I think I joined. Actually, I did my first dynasty this year, so I joined that one and I joined another one. So I'm maybe up two, but that's not that far off.
Hey, let me ask you this: are any of them auction style or no?
No, I did a couple of auctions in the past, but all mine are usually just snake.
Okay. So our league went to auction probably about 5 years ago now. I kind of do. I kind of like it. I didn't think I would, but
Yeah, that's
um,
different. It's cool. It's fun.
yeah. So how long have you been playing fantasy football?
10 plus years. No, I mean, it's gotta be way more than that.
Yeah, I was
Uh,
gonna say you probably started in
I'd
college.
say 15, 20 years.
Yeah, yeah. And have you had some success?
Yeah. Yeah,
Okay.
I've done well in the redrafts, leagues that I'm in. I've done well on the best ball. I'm no expert, don't get me wrong here. Some years are better than others. Some years are really good. I haven't had, and let's knock on wood here, too like big a down years. I've kind of went even in a lot of those. So it's been good. I love this time of year. I love drafting. It's just fun. Yeah, gets me going.
Yeah, the draft is probably one of the most funnest parts of the entire season, the entire process. So obviously we've got you on the podcast today because we are trying to promote the fantasy football preview series we've got with you. Yesterday we uploaded the first video, quarterbacks. Tomorrow we're gonna upload the running backs, and then probably next Friday we'll do wide receivers, and then next Sunday tight ends. So we're keeping it to those four. We're not doing any kickers, defenses, special teams, anything like that. Before we get you out of here, Corey, how about just your typical general kind of philosophy of how you attack the draft and the season?
Well, I think every league's different. So going into your league, you have to know the league rules. And I literally just messed up on this in my first ever dynasty league that I was in. I didn't read the league rules, and apparently we are starting two quarterbacks, and I had the number 2 overall pick for dynasty, and I picked a wide receiver. And that was like the dumbest thing I could have done, because in that situation, you start two quarterbacks, you have to take a quarterback, especially that high up. And so you have to know your league and your rules first. So that answer kind of varies a little bit. In most of my redrafts, I was really a big running back guy, but I think that's changed and morphed a little bit over the years. And kind of, I try to be more of like a hero running back. And what that is where you get your main stud running back, and then you kind of draft a bunch of wide receivers and other position players. Um, because based on what I read research wise, running back position is the one that kind of gets hurt most frequently. And then if you draft, high up running backs that get hurt, you don't have those top tier wide receivers, and you also don't have then your top tier running backs. And so your team kind of sometimes goes into shambles.
Sure. No, it makes sense. I mean, yeah, you hit the nail on the head there for sure. You got to know, there's so many different ways that these leagues work. You got to know the rules, because the rules will help dictate how you want to build your roster. So, my league, we're two quarterback league, and our scoring system heavily favors quarterbacks. So it's not the same now that we do the auction, but when we were doing snake draft, typically 18 of the first 20 picks were always quarterbacks. Now with an auction, it really doesn't matter. You can
Yeah,
nominate whenever. So,
right. Yep.
all right, Corey Wolters, fantasy football guru for the Attack the Rack YouTube channel. Let's start with quarterbacks. How are you feeling about quarterbacks this season?
Good, man. I think there's a lot of depth in quarterback. And again, I do want to reiterate, I am no fantasy expert here. And so like you can take the information I give you and take what you want with it, but don't like don't be hating me if I get these wrong. I'm no expert here.
We won't put out your social media channels for people to contact you. Don't worry.
I appreciate it. Um, yeah, no quarterbacks. What I have here is a tier-based system instead of like a top 10 ranking. I think the tier-based helps, it closes gaps, and I think it shows you where there's a drop-off at different positions throughout your draft, and I think that can be very helpful. And so, like, if you have, two or three quarterbacks in a certain tier, and you want to get one of those quarterbacks, but then you see that there's a larger number of wide receivers in a different tier, you might go with a quarterback, because chances of you not getting that tiered quarterback that you want won't be there at your next pick, when a tier of that wide receiver may still be there.
Sure.
So what I have today, I hope that made sense.
Yeah.
But what I had today is I just kind of went based on some tiers that I have. And then in that first tier, sometimes there could be one player, there could be four players, it could be two players. It changes and that varies. So this is no particular ranking order or system or anything like that. It's just these are my tier 1 quarterbacks that I have.
Sure.
For me, in the first tier is Patrick Mahomes. I think last year was one of his worst years outside of his rookie year, which he hardly played. But last year he struggled with a lot of drop balls from his receivers. I think that whole wide receiver core is a little bit revamped. I think he's going to have a pretty big bounce back year. Adding Hollywood Brown, they get Xavier Worthy in the draft. And then you have the second year player in Rashee Rice, who I think is going to be really good as well. And then not to mention his favorite target in Travis Kelce. So I think Patrick Mahomes has a big bounce back year, and he's in that tier 1 of quarterbacks. Another quarterback in that tier is Jalen Hurts. Jalen Hurts is a dual threat quarterback. He's going to get a ton of tush push touchdowns this year. I think he had around 15 of them just last year. And so that just literally bumps him, into another tier with his dual threat He is extremely good throwing the ball. He's extremely good running the ball. And he has two really good elite wide receivers that he can throw to. And then with the addition of Saquon Barkley too, I think that really helps out Jalen Hurts as well. And then the last guy I have in the tier is Josh Allen. Josh Allen did lose two of his starting wide receivers. However, his ability to run as a dual threat, he had 15 rushing touchdowns and he throws for over 4,500 yards. And so those guys essentially are your top three quarterbacks. If you're looking for quarterback early on, those are the guys that you want to target.
All right, sure.
Going now to tier two, I have four quarterbacks in my tier two. None of these are in particular order again, but I'll go ahead and start with Lamar Jackson. Lamar does not throw for the the high number of yards as the other quarterbacks in tier one, which is why I have him in here tier two. However, his rushing ability is elite, and that gets him potential to jump into that tier one range. Um, Adding Derrick Henry this year, I think is only going to help him out as well. And so Lamar has potential to jump into tier one. I just don't think he throws enough to get himself into that tier one category.
Sure.
Uh, Next would be Dak Prescott. Dak tossed for over 4,500 yards last year with 36 touchdowns. And he's got CeeDee Lamb in his prime. I think those two guys are going to dominate in 2024.
Okay.
Next would be CJ Stroud. CJ Stroud is loaded with weapons. He has, with Diggs coming on board and mixing at the running back spot, followed up with Nico Collins and Tank Dell. I think CJ Stroud is just surrounded by talent. And so he will throw for a ton of yards and a ton of touchdowns, but he doesn't have the massive upside of the running. So I just don't know if he'll break into that tier one, but he
Okay.
has to pass for a lot of yards to make sure he stays in that tier two range. The last guy I have in that tier two range is Joe Burrow. When healthy, he's just a stud with Jamar Chase and T. Higgins. He also has a little bit of running potential in him, but I think Joe's going to have a really good bounce back year from his being healthy from his injury last year.
Yeah, they in my opinion, here in your tiers, there's not a huge gap there, I don't believe, between tier one and tier two. Like you mentioned, if Lamar can get some passing yardage up, he could very well be on the verge of that tier one. CJ Stroud, in the league I was in last year, I was fortunate enough to draft or pick him up late. Just I needed a quarterback just in case, and he ended
Yeah,
up being my leading scorer last year. And
yeah,
like you said, incredible amount of weapons. One thing that makes me nervous about him, it's probably a cliche, but the sophomore slump possibility.
sure.
But he's another one that potentially, like you said, right on that borderline maybe of your tier one. And then Joe Burrow, if he comes back healthy, he also could be kind of in that mix. So doesn't see doesn't seem a huge gap between a lot of those tier one and tier two guys.
No, I don't think so. I think Lamar could get into tier one. I just don't know if the other three could.
Sure.
Um, it just because of Lamar's rushing ability is just elite, and so he could bounce into that tier one. I just think that those top four then are, hands down a little bit better than the rest of the field. But I don't have Lamar in that tier one because he just doesn't throw for as
Sure.
many air yards or as touchdowns as the other guys do.
Absolutely. Yep. And then you got tier three yet?
Yeah, I got tier three. I only got two quarterbacks in my tier three. This next guy was a little bit hard for me because I think he also has potential to go into tier one. Um, but he didn't give a great sample size last year after being hurt right away in the season, and that's Anthony Richardson.
Sure.
I think he has a massive upside with that running ability. I just don't know if he can throw the ball as well as others can, but he's also got some really good weapons. He's got a great running back around him. They got a good offensive line. So I could see Anthony Richardson bumping into that tier two range by the time the season's done. Could he jump into the tier one? Possibly. But this one was hard for me to rank, but his upside to me is what gets him into tier three.
Okay.
And then the other guy I have is Kyler Murray. Coming off a second year out of injury. He's got a good number one receiver in Marvin Harrison now, and then he also has a really good tight end. Kyler's one of those dual threat quarterbacks, and so those guys they get you so many more points, and so those are guys that you want to look to target. In the mids of your draft with Anthony Richardson and Kyler Murray with great upside potential.
Couple guys that are kind of a little bit maybe easy to forget about too, with Richardson getting hurt last year and Kyler Murray um, you know, kind of having a down season, some injuries, things like that.
Yeah, it's always funny doing drafts. I mean, the earlier you do drafts, the more these guys are down the board, and then you start to see drafts come around more frequently this time of year. Then those guys are always creeping back up there too.
Sure.
And you got, like I said, you got to know your league. Like our quarterbacks going early in the draft, that's a potential for you to get value at other picks. And then if quarterbacks are going later, it's a value opportunity for you to get value at the quarterback position too. So you got to know your league and your draft mates and the guys around you as well.
All right. Hey, any incoming rookies that could possibly have somewhat of an impact? Maybe a JJ McCarthy if he ends up as the starter. A lot of obviously, Caleb Williams is projected to be the starter. Not really any well, New England, who are they going to start?
Uh, right now, from what I hear, it's going to be Jacoby Brissett, but it's early on.
But
Yeah, I mean,
potentially an injury to Brissett or not playing well, maybe Drake May could step in. Any of these guys even worth um, drafting late, or more so maybe, hey, if they end up starting and end up having some success, you can always pick them up later.
yeah, I think there's two of them, and they're going to be drafted. That's Caleb Williams and uh, I'm drawing a blank on his name right now, and I shouldn't be. Washington, number 2 pick overall.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah.
Um, Help me out, Jaden Daniels.
Yes, Jaden Daniels. Yes. Okay.
Um, And so I think, both of those guys are, semi dual threats. They're rookies, Caleb Williams has, a lot around him. And so there's a good chance that he'd be pretty successful. But, um, it's all about building and development. And if they're able to do that, I think can be successful. But if they're rushed into it, you can see some uh, dramatic downfalls
Yeah,
coming from those spots in the rookie position.
absolutely. Seen it many times. How about any diamonds in the rough? Any sleepers maybe that
Uh, Now that is to be yet to be determined.
yeah. I mean, I don't want to say, is there a CJ Stroud this year? Because nobody could have predicted
Yeah.
what CJ Stroud did last year.
No, there's a handful of quarterbacks later on. Jordan Love's really good. Jared Goff. The thing about Jared Goff is he doesn't do well in outdoor games. But the
Uh,
thing about Jared Goff this year, he only has 3 outdoor games. And
oh,
so
okay.
he could be, a guy that you want to pick up later. Justin Herbert lost some targets, but he's a really good talent. And so there's going to be guys throughout the whole draft. If you don't hit those top tier guys, you can always find value in the quarterback position later on in the draft.
And
Don't panic.
and then Herbert got a phenomenal head coach now.
Oh yeah, the best.
All right. All right. So that'll wrap up quarterbacks. All right. Let's talk about running backs.
Yep.
What do you got for running backs for us, Corey?
Tier 1, I got one guy right now, and that's Christian McCaffrey. Mega volume, skilled, great offense. Could his age play a role? Maybe. I don't see it yet. I just think he's an elite performer. CMC is in a tier of his own.
Okay.
Tier 2, I got 3 running backs for you in the tier 2 range. I'm gonna start with Jahmyr Gibbs. This could be because I'm a Lions homer, but I don't think so. I think Gibbs has massive upside because I think they're going to use him more in the passing game this year.
Okay.
He'll get a ton of runs as well, but they're going to find ways to get him the ball, and I just think he is an elite, dynamic player that's going to be really good. And I'm also a Lions homer, so I like putting him in the tier 2 range. The other guys I got is Bijan Robinson and Brees Hall. Um, Both these guys got quarterback upgrades. I think they're going to look to use both these guys in the red zone more than they did last year. Both are going to get a number of targets. So I like all three of these running backs, and starting out your draft, if you're going to go one of those top wide receivers or starting with one of these four running backs, you're going to be off to a good start.
Okay. And then,
My next tier is tier three, and I have a number of running backs in tier three, and so these all guys could be moved into that tier two range. Um, and so, but they all like it just depends on how much volume they actually get. And so, I'll start with Travis Etienne. It sounds in what I'm reading, he's more heavily involved in the passing game this year. They're going to move him around. He got off to a really good start last year, but then faded out a little bit. But I do think Travis Etienne is going to come back really strong this year. Kyron Williams came on the scene last year. A lot of drafts. He went undrafted, scored over 15 total touchdowns, and he missed a few games. What's going to hurt him, I think, is one of the greatest running backs or the greatest running back in Michigan history is Blake Corum's coming onto the scene.
yeah,
That could eat into his fantasy value a little bit, which would hurt him.
sure.
Um, Next I have, and this tier three would be Saquon Barkley. Saquon could get into the tier two range. What hurts him is what Philly does really well, which is the tush push. So Jalen Hurts is going to get about 10 tush push touchdowns next year, which takes away from Saquon getting those touches.
Sure.
So that's why I have Saquon in that tier three range.
Okay.
But he is potential. He could bump up into the tier two. I just think that Hurts takes away too many opportunities for him to score touchdowns.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Other guy would be Jonathan Taylor. Again, has potential to get up there. Health concerns with JT a little bit. That's why I'm not really too excited about putting him into my tier two yet. But he's an overall stud. He has finished it very high up in years past in the running back position, but I have him in my tier three this year. Couple other guys that are finding pretty interesting are Derrick Henry. Age is a factor with him. He's going to be 31 in January, which is very old for a running back.
Yeah, it is.
Um, but the Ravens are a run heavy team, and so with Derrick Henry behind a better offensive line, could see a lot of success this year. And then the next two, Isaiah Pacheco and then Devon Achane, these guys could be very explosive. I'm not quite sure yet if Isaiah Pacheco plays that three down role. If he still sticks to first and second down, then he's going to stay in that, tier three, tier four range. But if he gets that third down role where Jerick McKinnon played and catching a lot of passes, he could easily bump into that tier two range.
Okay.
Um, and then Devon Achane, this kid could be special, man. The only issue I have with him is that he's small. Um, he played in I don't have the stats in front of me right now, but he played in a handful of games last year and his numbers were off the charts for when he was on the field. And so if he can stay healthy and if he gets anywhere from 15 to 20 touches a game, he literally could, possibly win you leagues.
Okay.
So I'd be pretty high in looking at Devon Achane. If again, I wouldn't want him necessarily as my first RB.
Okay.
But if you have a solid RB core and he falls to you later on the draft, I think that's something you might want to look at.
All right. And then how about rookies? Any rookies that could make any kind of impact this year in the running back position?
Um, Brooks from Carolina, if he's healthy, not too sure where he's going to end up going, or when he's going to be able to start playing.
Okay.
I hear 3-4 weeks, possibly he might be out, but I don't know if that's going to be further or not. And so, my only thing is like, I want to win like right away. I don't want to like draft a guy and then wait on him, depending on what my team looks like.
Yep.
And so if you're drafting him and he can't play for the first 3-4 weeks and you start 1-3, chances you making the playoffs are substantially lower than you drafting a guy that might be able to help you in your lineup in the range that he usually goes.
Sure. Uh,
So
what's that?
no, go ahead.
Yeah. And then the last question with running backs, any sleepers?
Uh yeah, there's a couple up my sleeve, but unfortunately I cannot give that information to you right now because I
Okay.
am drafting in 2 nights from now. Uh,
Okay.
and I need to keep that
Well,
information ahead of time.
Well, hold on. 2 nights from now, which it would be Saturday night.
Yes.
This running back segment isn't coming out until Sunday.
Okay. I would say, guys, that I like Ken Walker. I
Yeah.
think he could have a pretty explosive year this year. Um, I'm pretty high on him. I like James Conner, but that's another health issue. I think he stays healthy. He could be very, very elite at his position. Um, and then, there's those old guys like the Austin Ecklers of the world,
Yeah.
that, are going to provide value later on that you can get late in your draft that I think could be pretty decent.
Yeah. And Austin Eckler, someone like in a league like mine, where um, you know, running backs that get receiving touchdowns or quarterbacks that get rushing touchdowns, there's a premium on that. So someone like Austin Eckler with a scoring system like my league could be pretty key.
Yeah,
Um,
and that's more of like a PPR type league, whether it's a full
exactly.
PPR, a half PPR, or just standard league. Yeah, that
Yep.
varies.
All right, so that'll wrap up running backs. All right, after a scenery change and a wardrobe change, let's dive into some wide receivers. Corey, what do you got for wide receivers?
Tier one, CD Lamb. I know he's kind of in these contract talks right now with Dallas, but I think it's going to get worked out. CD Lamb is clear tier one for me. He was a monster last year with Dak, and I think you're going to see a lot of the same things this year. Um, once CD hits the field. CD Lamb is in my tier one, as well as there's only one other guy in there, and that's Tyreek Hill.
Mhm.
Age is creeping up on Tyreek Hill, but I think he is so skilled and he's such a in an explosive offense that Tyreek Hill is just going to blow it up. He can run out of the backfield, he can catch deep balls, he can run short routes, and then he can take those to the house. I just think Tyreek Hill is a special talent, and these are, in my opinion, two of the top guys you really want to target in your if you're higher up on your draft order come draft day.
All right, so you're confident CeeDee Lamb is going to not only be playing but playing with the Dallas Cowboys.
Yes, I am. I very few times does any of these contract, issues not work out.
Yeah.
I think one that I can remember, and this is a while ago, is like Le'Veon Bell for the Pittsburgh Steelers sat out some games because of it. Jerry Jones, he's not going to let CD sit out. He's going to pay him the money, and CD will be fine.
And then you mentioned Tyreek Hill in a top 100 players, NFL players voted on by the players. You saw that Tyreek Hill came in at number one.
I did. Yeah, I saw that just I don't know whether it was this morning or last night or something, but yeah,
Yeah,
I saw that. Um yeah, dude, he's so explosive. He is an awesome football player and he's so fun to watch.
and huge for fantasy football. But can
Yep.
put up some big numbers.
Yeah. Next up in the tier two, I have three wide receivers there. First one is clearly our favorite in Amon-Ra St. Brown, being a Lions fan. I do think Amon-Ra is probably the safest wide receiver in the draft that you could take here. I mentioned earlier that the Lions only play 3 outdoor games, so the majority of their games are played indoors. And I think he's going to have a huge season. And I say he's the safest because you talk about CD with the contract issues. You have Tyreek Hill, who's getting a little bit older. You have Jamar Chase, who's also kind of having some contract issues as well, who hasn't been participating in practice. And then you have Justin Jefferson with a huge question mark. And so to me, Amon-Ra St. Brown is the safest wide receiver to take in this year's fantasy draft.
Sure.
Next would be Jamar Chase. Getting Joe Burrow back is going to be huge for Jamar Chase. He's a special talent out of LSU. Whenever Joe Burrow is there, Jamar Chase always puts up huge numbers. And so he stays in the tier two. And then last thing I do have in the tier two is Justin Jefferson. To me, arguably, he's the best wide receiver in football. There is some quarterback issues there. Um, And now it could, I don't know if it can get worse. I don't know if JJ was going to play or not this year. But now we just found out today that he is out for the season. But I think Justin Jefferson's just going to have a massive target value this year. And he's just too good not to keep in that high top tier range.
Okay.
So those three round out the tier two raise phase for the wide receivers.
Okay.
In the last tier, I just have two wide receivers there because I think there's a little bit of a drop off after these two guys.
Okay.
To me, Garrett Wilson, I think he's finally going to show what he can really do on the football field, getting Aaron Rodgers for a full season. I think Garrett Wilson's going to have a huge year. I think he's extremely talented, and he also is going to get a boatload of targets. The other one is AJ Brown, who's just been massive in Philly with Jalen Hurts. They get the new OC in Philly as well, and I think he's really going to utilize AJ Brown throughout this year, and he's going to have another massive year. He's such a physical wide receiver.
All right. Any wide receivers, or well, let's start with any rookies maybe that might have an impact.
Yeah, I mean, there's two that really stand out, and it's Malik Neighbors and Marvin Harrison. I think those two guys are very special talents. They're big body receivers, very explosive, can run good routes. And then Roma Dunze is very similar in that regard. Um, but you're going to find every year rookie wide receivers. There's going to be some that just flash all the time. I think there's a number of guys who could be really special this year and moving forward. Um, Throughout the season.
Yeah, and Roma Dunze, who we've seen featured on Hard Knocks. In fact, last night's episode 2, he got a little bit of camera time, looking pretty good. But obviously, you got Keenan Allen and you got DJ Moore, certainly more higher targets than what he will. He
Yeah.
will. So. All right, and then any sleepers in the wide receiver field?
Um, I think like Debo Samuel, I don't know, you're not necessarily gonna call that a sleeper, but Brandon Ayuk still has not gotten his contract yet that I've heard. If he gets traded, I do think Debo Samuel could move up into that tier three or even tier two if he stays healthy all year. Um, I think he's a pretty special player there and a much needed player in San Francisco. Um, so I think he could be pretty good. There's other guys down the list. Jordan Addison. I just read today that he got carted off the field. That's going to be a big blow to Minnesota. Um, but I would say some deeper sleepers. Oh man, I really like Brian Thomas Jr. That he's in Jacksonville right now. I think he's having a pretty good camp. You look at T. Higgins. I think he's gonna have a bounce back year, having Joe Burrow back. I like Devontae Smith as well in Philadelphia. There's a number of receivers that you can get in the mid to later rounds that are going to really help and improve your roster.
Well, hey, one last question in the wide receiver field. For Detroit Lions homers who like to draft Lions, what
Yeah,
is JMO?
man, I think it's hard because you hear nothing but really good things about JMO right now in camp, and that he's just killing it. I read again today; he had an awesome day again today. It's hard to see, like, if he can stay healthy and if he's on the field, how explosive and how productive he could be. But unfortunately, he has not been on the field the first 2 years. And so I think the upside is there. I think JMO, there's a high chance, especially in the drafts around here, that he goes a little bit higher than he should. But that's just because, our Lions fans, we got to have a lion every year. Um, but I could see JMO definitely having an outstanding year this year.
All right, so that's wide receivers. Let's now talk tight ends. This will be the last position we're going to cover.
Yeah, tight ends tier one. I got three guys for you. For me, Travis Kelsey. I still think he comes back in the Kansas City offense, and then you just found out that Hollywood Brown goes down, which then gives more targets. I think to Travis Kelsey. I think Travis Kelsey dominates in 24 again, led by Patrick Mahomes. And you want to grab a piece of that Chiefs offense somehow, some way in your drafts, and to start out with Travis Kelsey is an awesome way to do it. Next up, I have Trey McBride. Trey McBride, he kind of took over last year, midway through the year, and since he did that, his numbers just skyrocketed. You know, you come back with a healthy Kyler Murray for a full year. I think Trey McBride is going to jump into that top three at the end of the fantasy year tight end point value, where he's going to be really good throughout the year. He's going to be probably maybe the second leading target. For the Cardinals, probably behind Marvin Harrison Jr. But I think Trey McBride is going to creep up into getting that tier one range. And then the last is our beloved Sam Laporta, who had a really good rookie season last year. You know, there's a chance that he could be the second leading target getter in Detroit behind Amon Ra. But hopefully he can just continue that success that he had his rookie season, especially so you know our Lions can continue to win games this year. But I think Sam Laporta is getting in that top tier range as well. Tier two. Here I have, you know, I have five tight ends in this tier two, and then after that, to me, it drops off.
Okay, sure.
So I would highly recommend you want to get one of these top 8 guys, top 7 guys. And if you don't, then I would just maybe punt for later on and then grab a tight end later on in your draft.
Okay.
Um, but the tier 2 is filled with Dalton Kincaid. I think coming back, he could be the number one target for Josh Allen after losing 2 of their starting wide receivers. And so that his upside is really massive being in Buffalo. And if you're a number one target for Josh Allen, you're going to have a really special year.
Yeah.
Next guy would be Mark Andrews. When this guy is healthy, he is a top, 2, 3 tight end in the league. He's always just behind Travis Kelsey. The problem with Mark Andrews, and the only reason why I have him in tier two, is he has not been able to stay healthy. But when he is also another tight end that can lead the Ravens in receiving targets and also receiving this year.
And I think he got hurt today in practice too.
Did he really? I did not hear that yet.
Yeah, it doesn't sound like it's anything serious, but
Okay.
it's
Actually, you know
the
what? I
point
think he
of
got
him always getting hurt.
no. I think he got in a car accident.
Yes, that's what it was. He got in a
Yeah.
car accident. Yes, you're right. So they said he might miss a couple practices, but he'll be okay. That's right. It
Yeah.
was a car accident. Okay.
Yep.
Not fun.
No, yeah. The next guy is up. He was a target monster last year in Evan Ingram for the Jags. He had 143 targets, and then they lost Calvin Ridley. So, you know, you're just going to provide more opportunity for Evan Ingram, which you have that many targets, you know, you're going to be in that top tier range. And so that's where I have Evan Ingram in the tier two range. My last 2 tight ends that I have there is George Kittle. If you watch Receiver on Netflix, you can see this dude is all about personality. He loves football. He's going to play football for a long time. He's very productive. He's a big focal point to their offense. If they end up losing Brandon Ayuk, I think George Kittle is going to, his numbers are also going to improve. And so that could be a really big pickup, taking George Kittle, especially if losing Ayuk. And then the last guy I have in this range who could easily bump up into tier one is, you know, arguably probably the most elite tight end from an athleticism standpoint that we've seen, which is Kyle Pitts.
Okay.
He's a huge upgrade at the quarterback position, getting Kirk Cousins. And so we will really see where Kyle Pitts falls this year. But because of his athleticism and an upgrade in quarterback, I think Kyle Pitts could be a special player this year that could bump himself up into that tier one range.
All right. And then any rookie tight ends that maybe will make an impact. Obviously, if so, someone you would look at maybe, you know, if you like you said, if you don't get one of those 8 guys, you maybe want to just look at a tight end towards the end of your draft.
Yeah, I mean, rookie wise, you know, you have Brock Bowers, who's arguably the best tight end prospect to ever come out of the draft. But there's so many question marks with their offense and the quarterback play, and then they have Devontae Adams and Jacoby Myers. You know, those guys are going to take up a lot of targets. If anything, it's going to be Brock Bowers. From a
Yeah.
skill standpoint, you know, he's top of the line. I don't see any too many other rookies that, you know, it's hard, I think, for a rookie to get such a big target share early on. And so, you know, Brock Bowers has the potential to do it, but you know, I'm that's not somebody who I'm targeting in my drafts often.
And then if you don't get any of those top eight, and is there a sleeper you might strike gold with later on in the draft?
Um, yeah, I like there's a couple guys that I like later on. Like if I'm gonna punt on it, I like Pat Fryermuth from Pittsburgh Steelers. I think he can have a nice bounce back year and upgraded quarterback play. Depending on the connection with David Njoku and Deshaun Watson, you know, Njoku is a very extremely athletic quarterback who has put up big numbers. You know, the Ravens, there's talk about going to a two tight end set. And, you know, if they do that and then Isaiah Likely plays, Isaiah Likely came on strong last year, especially when Mark Andrews got hurt. You know, I could see Isaiah Likely having another good year as well. So those are some guys that if I don't get into that top, you know, 7, 8 range, I will fall back and try to draft one of those, you know, just thinking here a second, you know, Jake Ferguson, I think could be a really good target guy, especially in Dallas. And if CD Lamb does for whatever reason hold out, I think Jake Ferguson's value goes skyrocket. And so those are just some names that I like to target later on, if I don't end up drafting one of these top tier guys.
All right, Corey. Well, that will wrap up tight ends. And Corey, thank you so much for taking time out of your busy schedule to spend about an hour with us talking fantasy football. Great preview. We went over quarterbacks, running backs, wide receivers, tight ends. Um, awesome job, awesome information. And I know you have you had one of your drafts now or a couple of them?
Yeah, I had the one live draft this past weekend, and then I have another one. I had actually a couple more coming up in the next couple days, and then a couple more after that throughout the next couple weeks.
It is draft season, Corey. So,
Best
well,
time of
okay,
the year.
so you had one. How do you feel coming away from it?
Yeah, I think pretty good. You know, you always look back and like, man, if I would have done this here, if I would have done this here, if I, you know, I reached here. I think it's pretty common you do that. You know, I had, you know, redraft leagues are a little bit different. Your own, your home leagues are different. Um, you know, I kind of had a plan that I wanted to stick to, and I tried to do that the best that I could.
Yep.
I'm excited about my team. And so yeah, we'll just have to hopefully stay healthy throughout the rest of the preseason. I know there's injuries that are just popping up all the time now.
Yep. No, for sure. There has been a lot of them the last few days. So, all right, Corey. Well, thanks a lot. Good luck this season in the 2024 fantasy football season. Hopefully, out of all those leagues you're in, you'll win a couple and at least break even.
That'd be awesome.
All right, Corey. Thanks a lot.
You bet. See you, Kurt.